to let our little ones from 3 years old to 3rd grade exit out and have a great time in children's worship as we sing this song together. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice, take joy, my King, in what you hear.
sing his praise, and then to glory go, and reign with him through endless days, because he loved me so. He loved me so. He loved me so. He gave his precious life for me, because he loved me so. He has made me glad, he has made me glad, I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad, he has made me glad, I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart, I will enter his courts with praise. I will say, this is the day that the Lord has made, I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad, he has made me glad, I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad, he has made me glad, I will rejoice, for he has made me glad.
Amen. Please be seated. And, Chris, can you turn down number 1 just like a tiny bit so I'm not, I don't like I'm yelling at everybody. We've been in a series called Forgiveness 101. Today we're going to be talking about, I don't like this, I'm going to change this. I'm going to use my Britney Spears mic. It's kind of... Maybe this is much better. The series, I hope, has been something that's been a little challenging for everybody, something that just is making you stretch yourself. Got the lead there. It's really a hard thing to do to forgive people, especially people who hurt you, and more importantly, family that hurts you. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Numbers chapter 12, almost exclusively for this morning. Before we get there, we need to get ourselves ready for a sermon by hearing a great, hilarious, inspiring preacher joke. So, I heard the story of a woman who was teaching children's Bible hour, and as she was sitting with all her students, she was trying to make a point. And so she was saying, okay, kids, if I sell everything I own, have a big garage sale, sell my house, and give all the money to the church, will that get me into heaven? And they all screamed, no! And she goes, okay, well, what if I go to the church building every day, and I clean everything up, and I do all this stuff around the building, make it look spotless? Will that get me into heaven? And they all go, no! And she goes, well, what's going to get me in heaven? And a kid chimes up from the back and says, you gotta be dead! I don't know. You had to be there. All right, get that out of the way. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 12. This is a story about Moses, and I want to give us a backstory all the way to this point. The backstory of Moses is Moses was saved at birth. For those who don't know, there was this ruling out to just start killing all of these 2 and under Hebrew children. He was sent up the river in a basket. Pharaoh's daughter finds him. He gets raised under Pharaoh's care, with his mom getting to come in and do all these different things. So he's kind of raised in 2 different households, Hebrew and Egyptian. He doesn't really understand all of the, oppression that's going on, but he also knows who he is and who he's from, and so he kind of does, but he's living under this household. And in order for him to feel like he's making a difference, he sees an Egyptian guy trying to hurt a Hebrew and ends up killing him. He's like, oh, what happens? Then later, These guys are getting in a fight. He tries to separate him. He goes, what, are you going to kill one of us too? And he's like, oh no, they know. And he runs away. In this process of running away, he starts to find himself, and God, through it, calls him into doing something that most murderers aren't called to do, which is, hey, lead my people out of Egypt. I think most of us would say there is millions of people that you could choose that are more qualified than me, this murderous person with an anger problem, maybe an identity issue, some self-esteem problems too. There are plenty of people that you can choose. But God is persuasive because, one, he met him as a burning bush. That should have been enough. Two, he just kind of yells at him, I'm going to give you the words. I'm going to give you somebody with you. Just go. Just do what I ask you to do. Stop being a knucklehead, and I will take care of you. In this process, Moses changes from a man who was a murderer, kind of a coward at the same time because he ran away from his problems. He had all these different issues that were going on, and God transforms him. And we're going to read a verse in a minute where he is referred to as the most humble man to walk the earth. Some versions say the most meek to walk the earth. He grew in his relationship so connected to God that he changed. If you knew him from when he was a kid versus you knew him as the man who was leading a group of people who were probably really difficult to deal with out of Egypt, you would see an incredible change because God transforms him. Now, we get to see here in what our study is going to go on today is that there is a really great correlation between humility and forgiveness. Moses' humility came from understanding that he did not deserve forgiveness, but God found a way to wipe out all of his transgressions, to make him as white as snow, as white as wool. We see in Moses this drastic change. But here's something that happens in this story. So we're just going to get there. We'll read this together. Let's start in verses 1 through 3. It says, so Miriam and Aaron are his sister and brother, just to give you that. There is nothing more difficult than your family hating on you by the person that you are choosing to marry. This causes a lot of tension in a lot of marriages, just so you know, in a lot of families. It puts a big division in some people. And this happens in the story. And so let's check it out, and we're going to see his response. It says, Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. And then here's the kicker. Now Moses was a very humble man. More humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. That's how we end this little section of Scripture. I don't know if you know this, but racism has never, it's not a new thing. This is a racial story also, just so you know. A Cushite woman was a darker skinned clan. Can you hear this one again? Number 4. And they didn't like that. Did you know that? This is where the tension came from in this story, and they used that to talk about their brother in a way that says, hey everybody, did God only speak through Moses? I'm sure he spoke through us too. They started to build a divide, even in family, over something of who Moses chose to marry. Now Moses, being the most humble man on the face of the earth, he does something that none of us would do. He actually waits for the Lord to respond. He was patient. He didn't react like, who are you to tell me who I could marry? What is your problem? Don't come to any of the family get-togethers then. He didn't do any of that. Because he has this relationship with God, he already knows that he hears his problems and his issues. If we think of this story and we just look at it for face value, 1, them spreading these things about Moses is false. 2, they should have no problem with who he marries anyways. 3, they should come to him and talk to him and not just blast this out for everyone. If we look at it from the outside in, we'd say these guys deserve to be punished of some way. There should be consequences for these actions. And there should be, and there's going to be. there's going to be a surprise kicker in the story of how Moses responds to even how God wants to treat them for what they are saying about Moses. I want to give us a story that's a little more modern to go with this, and we're going to pause it here and there. There's a story about this older woman. I'm going to call her Martha. This older woman who happened to be in a car. There was a group of young men who thought it would be hilarious to drive around the city and throw frozen chickens or turkeys, whatever it was, out their car at people's cars as they drove by. They thought this would be a funny thing to do. And their dumb, young, not knowing what would happen if you did these things, ended up going this way as Martha was driving this way, and they threw this out their window. It went through her window and hit her in the face. She had to have something like 9 reconstructive surgeries on her face because of what had happened to her. You imagine driving at like 40 miles an hour and frozen chicken hitting you in the face. She had a moment where she got to sit in a courtroom before the judge who was about to sentence these young men, and she does something. It's the same kind of pause in this story where Moses is sitting before the true judge and what's about to happen to his brother and sister and the judgment that is waiting them. So let's kind of see what happens as we move forward. There's this... hey, click me forward while you're back there. There's this moment where you know what you deserve to get, but something else happens. This is where the surprise happens. Kick me forward one more time. In Numbers chapter 12, 4-9, it says, "At once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron and Miriam, come out to the tent of meeting, all 3 of you." This is like when your mom says, "Come here," or dad, depending on when they say, "Go get a switch." That's old. Now it's like, go find a chair that you're going to sit in for timeout. I don't know. It's not as scary. Back in the day, it was a little more scary. Go get my favorite wooden spoon, whatever it is for you. So the 3 of them went out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud, and he stood at the entrance of the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. Imagine, just real quick, anybody ever did something really dumb in school, and you got to get sent to the principal's office? And that was bad enough, but then you had to go home. And the whole walk home, for those of you who had to walk home, you're thinking, I'm going to die. At some point today, there will be a death in my family, and it will be me. I was the one who did these dumb things in elementary school. I kind of had a tough road, so I got into a lot of fights when I was a kid, especially through 6th grade. It was one of those, I felt like I had to, or I would get into more fights, and that was my excuse. And so one day, I got into a really big fight at school. It's 3rd grade. Not just one, but 3 in one day. My mom doesn't know there was 3 in one day to this day. This is where the story hits a turn. Back in the day, we had these things called answering machines with a tape, little one, that would go inside of it. And I got home, because I got home before everybody else did. My mom was a single mom, so I knew I had a certain amount of time before she would get home. So I could run, and get home, and I go to the room, and click the button, and it says, "This is Edward Kimball Elementary School. We would just like you to know that your son is going to have in-house suspension because he got into a fight, blah, 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 blah." So I go, this light bulb came on in my head. I know what I need to do. I took that tape, and I flipped it, and put it back in. For 3 days, my mom's like, "There's something wrong with this answer machine." I was like, "I know, it's weird." Just sweating. My dumb self doesn't realize my mom knew every teacher at that school. The next year we ended up teaching at that school, knew the principal very well. And in her way, she goes, "Hey, I heard there's something that went on at school the other day." "What are you talking about?" I stretched out what I deserved. I got 2 days. But in those 2 days, I did not feel any good. For those 2 days, I didn't feel like I got away with something. It was just waiting for the rock to fall on me. And it did, pretty hard. And I knew that punishment was coming. I never, got over having, the sweaty hands and feeling nervous all the time until the punishment actually happened. Imagine this. God now coming down in a pillar, standing before the tent after he just said, "You two, step into my office and have something to say to you. You have to understand how terrified you would be because you've already seen what God does to people that he's upset with. You don't last very long. You die, usually. Or you get turned into salt, or you get covered in water because the sea just came back over. You are now stressing out. Step forward, please. He said, listen to my words. Yes. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful to all my house. With him, I speak face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? He's starting to lay this on. So now they know they're really in trouble because they know that he knows that they've been spreading all sorts of stuff about Moses. Who is he? Doesn't God speak through us too? And he's letting them know, hey, I want you to know that I may use you, but you are not my friend. Moses, he is my friend. I call him friend. We meet face to face. I don't even speak to him in crazy ways where he can't get it. I speak to him like he is somebody that I will just sit with and speak to him plainly. If you knew this about Moses and our relationship, wouldn't that have brought a little bit of fear in what you were doing? So now you know even more. One, God comes down the pillar. You're scared. He says, come in here. You're more scared. Now he's saying, what you said is not true. This servant, Moses, is not just any old person. Why aren't you afraid of this? Now they're probably terrified because they know the truth of what they did that's wrong. See, in part of all of this forgiveness stuff, if you're on the other side of things and you need and want forgiveness from somebody else, you really can't get that until you know what you have done and really experience it. We as people are really good at doing this thing where we do something to somebody and we just try to sweep it under the rug and pretend like it never existed. And then we don't feel bad about it. Because if we don't see it all the time, or if we don't view it as reality, then we think, hey, that was, you just misunderstood my words. We use excuses like that. You just didn't get what I was really trying to say. You're just too sensitive. But the reality is, once you get, that's what we talked about last week, when that is called out by its name, you did these things. We want to move on, but you did these things. And a lot of times there is consequences for those things. Even in your forgiveness, there is consequences for some actions. And part of it is dealing with that guilt and that stuff that you have that you're holding on to. I wasn't lying when I flipped that tape over. I never felt better. I was terrified because I was constantly trying to continue this lie to get away with something that I already knew, eventually, she knew about. And in that case, what do? You can apologize all you want, but then you got to say, I'm sorry for this, that I could have just been sorry for, but now I got to add like 7 other things. And I'm sorry for this, please don't kill me. Because that's where we're at. But if she never would have said, hey, this tape was flipped over, I would have still been living in it because I was too afraid to admit that I did some things, not only that affected me, but that also affected the name of my family, my mom's credibility, of how she raised me. All of these different things come into play that I wasn't owning up to. Aaron and Miriam now are finding themselves to a point where they know what they did wrong, and God is not happy with them. And this is where your fear really kicks in. The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. That's when the door slams. I'll talk to you later. Nobody? Me? I must have been terrible. This is when you get what you did was wrong. God is really not happy with you. But here's something that really cool that happens. And we get to see the characteristics of God in Moses. We've already seen his transformation of being the most humble man over anybody else that's walked the earth. Moses becomes something so different. And we see it in truth on how he deals with the situation. Jesus told everybody, hey, it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. It's that eye for an eye thing. But then he comes back and says, no, I tell you something different. It's even better if you can love your neighbor and love your enemy. Find a way to love those who are against you. This is his approach as the New Testament goes on. In the Old Testament, they had this eye for an eye thing. When you did something wrong, there was a lot of rules. This happens to you. One of them, like, if you steal something, that hand is going to go missing. They just did things in a way that showed you your sin, or whatever it would be called then, would be dealt with immediately. Jesus starts to show us, no, I need you to also learn how to love those who don't love you. And he shows us this completely in his life and how he takes the cross, and we've been really hitting that a lot in this forgiveness series. But check this out. Moses, with his brother and his sister, knows what they deserve. God is already angry. He could just sit back and say, hey, it's not me that's doing this to you. God saw what you did. You are getting it. You deserve every bit of it. But check Romans 12, 10 through 15. When the cloud lifted above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became as white as snow, not the good way. And Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had defiling skin disease. And he said to Moses, please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold against us the sin that we have so foolishly committed. See how Aaron is really quick to see this, because was he the one that was first punished in this story? No. He looked at his sister and goes, oh, I don't want that either. Moses, please, help us. Forgive us of this thing that we've done to you. And Moses, he continues, do not let her be a stillborn infant coming from his mother's womb, with his flesh half eaten away. So here's what Moses does. He could easily, if any of you have been hurt, you don't have to raise your hand. This could be something. If any of you have ever been hurt by a family member, especially towards somebody you love, that you've committed your life to, that you want to live with forever, the sanctity of marriage, you know how hard that can be, because you love your spouse, but you know you love your family, and that divide can be so difficult. And you could easily just be so mad, so angry, that you would take something out of the one that you love, that you would say, sorry, I can't do anything for you here. The Lord has spoken. It'd be really easy. And you might even laugh and smile on your way out. I'm talking about high five to you, God. But he doesn't. Like, his heart is so changed that he says, he cries out to God, please, God, heal her. This has to be a surprise for them both. Because why would God listen to Moses? Why would he even change his mind? Well, with a heart that is so full of what God really is showing, because in the scripture that we read in Psalms, what does it say about God? He is so patient and slow to anger that he can wipe out our transgressions, that his love is as far as the east is from the west. He has this great love and compassion for his children, for his people. Even though there's consequences, he has this deep love. And Moses shows this in his way of forgiving his brother and sister. And he's not just forgiving them, he's actually advocating for them to the one who punished them. It's like, God, please, heal her. Now, God does some things, and the whole group that's going to be a witness of this, they go through some things too. This forgiveness changes a lot of people. The Lord replied to Moses, if her father had spit in her face, would she not have been in disgrace for 7 days? Confine her outside the camp for 7 days. After that, she can come in and be brought back. He's saying, and I know he probably doesn't even want to do this. I don't know, maybe he does. It's God. I can't talk to God. But he still gives, if there's still a consequence. Could you imagine if she did this to her father? Wouldn't there be a consequence? Wouldn't there be something that she needs to do? This is what I want you to do. He hears Moses' plea to heal her. He hears Moses' plea and just saying, in that plea, you can hear him almost say, I forgive her. I need you to forgive her too. Heal her. Send her out for 7 days, bring her back in. So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move until she was brought back. Do you see what happens in this moment? Like, not only does this affect Moses and the group, every single person in that camp did not move on from where they were until her punishment was up and she was brought back into the fold. How much do you think Miriam and Aaron changed in the way in which they treated Moses after this? When I really deserved a greater punishment for this whole fiasco that I did with my mom, she was very gentle with me, sat down and told me how dumb it was that I did those things. There was a punishment there, but it was not nearly the death sentence that I thought it was going to be. And through it, she taught me a lesson and gave me compassion. I had some groundings that had to happen. The really toughest one is I had to miss a soccer game. That was tough. Right at the heart. But what it was is it wasn't just a punishment without an understanding of why. And on top of it, it was more of a, now that you've learned this, I need you to know that I love you and you need to move on and not do this anymore. It took me a while to learn that lesson. However, in that moment, I changed the way that I viewed my mom. I changed the way that I viewed her heart towards me. I changed the way that I viewed myself in her eyes. That instead of being somebody who's just a problem kid that's tough to deal with, she viewed me as her child that she loves and needs to learn through the mistakes. They were brother and sister that I know Moses loved. And through a mistake, they needed to learn how to change the way that they were approaching life. And I have to imagine that they changed the way that they viewed Moses. And if they didn't, the next time was probably not going to go the best way. Moses showed them a deep forgiveness that had to be so surprising to them because they didn't deserve it. He shouldn't have gave it to them, but he advocated on top of it so that God would intercede. All right. I want to give us something in this series to keep us moving forward, to really seeing how deep of an issue this is for us. This is going to be my challenge for us as we leave and come back next week. And I really hope, if you're not afraid to do so, this should be a time where you can share stories with each other, maybe next week at some point, with someone that you trust or love or whatever. There might be some things that you are holding on to on both sides of this situation that I want us to really think about. Our very first week, we talked about that being unforgiving, it traps us, it holds us in prison. I want you to think on both sides here for a moment. Somebody that you hurt, somebody you've been hurt by, family that you don't know how to talk to, maybe a really good friend that you just decided to abandon and leave behind because something they said. I want you to think about some things and how you can be a surprise to them this week. That your call to them could be a surprise this week. However you like to get in communication with somebody will be a surprise that says, hey, maybe if you're on this side, I was thinking about some things and I know that I might have done something that hurt you. And I was wondering if we can get together. I'd just love to talk with you. Maybe you're on the other end of it and you can say, hey, you don't know this, but I was really hurt by something that happened. But I just want you to know that, I want to show some love and compassion through it. I want to offer forgiveness, and I want us to be together and move on and have this relationship. Maybe on top of that, it's a prayer to God for an intercession for them too. God, this person really harmed me. Maybe you don't even know them. Maybe there's somebody that's not a friend to you, and maybe you pray a prayer to God for them. God, I just want you to know that I would love for you to forgive them of this hurt that was on me. That action releases so much of your heart and gives it open to God. Whereas if we go the other way, we're just slowly starting to harden it. But we don't have room for people anymore. We don't have room to offer forgiveness to them. Now we become short with other people in our life. It starts to spill over into the way that we handle ourselves at work, to the way that we deal with our kids or our wives, to the way that we deal with ourselves. We really need to start the channels opening them of forgiveness. So my challenge for you is make that surprise to somebody. Be a Moses this week. Offer an opportunity to show humility because you know that you need forgiveness too. Maybe you have a moment that you can reflect on where you deserved a lot worse than you got and you were so grateful for the person who offered you some compassion. Maybe that is your turn to pay that forward. But ultimately, all of this really doesn't mean anything unless your heart's there, because what forgiveness does is it provides reconciliation. It is a bond. It is something that gets us back together. It builds bridges. That is the whole theme for what we're trying to do, because it does it in two ways. When we start to allow ourselves to be forgiven and offer forgiveness to other people, that also builds a bridge with God too. And it allows us to continue to receive that forgiveness from Him and understand that we're not perfect, that we're going to make mistakes, but His love is so deep, so wide, it covers us all the way from the east to the west. That His love is deeper than any depth of this earth that we can comprehend. His love can cover any sin that we think is too big. Let us allow that to sink in how we affect other people. So, be a surprise this week to somebody else. Let's go to God in prayer. Let's pray for that action and that release from our shoulders for this week. Dear Father, Lord, we are so grateful that you love us, that you forgive us. We don't deserve any of it. We deserve to be the ones on the cross, but you put your Son on the cross for us. That in itself should spur us to understand that we need to offer this to other people. But our hearts sometimes get stuck in human mode. We can't grasp how you would do that for us, and we know that we're not at your level, so we don't even try, and we just think that you'll forgive us through it all anyways. But God, I just hope that you help us to be a reflection of your Son, and in that, start to offer forgiveness to others, and more importantly, I think sometimes we need to ask for forgiveness as well. There's nothing more humbling than coming before someone and say, I'm sorry. I know I've wronged you. Or I'm sorry I wasn't right. These are words that we don't like to use often because it makes us feel insecure about ourselves. But God, sometimes we need your help to help us know that we can come and be humble before others and humble before you and say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Forgive me. I pray that you help us to get to that point this week. Just help us to try it out, to take it for a test ride, to call somebody and say, hey, I'm sorry, or hey, I just want you to know that what you did, I was hurt by it, but I forgive you. Help us to get there. And God, I pray that in doing that, we see you in a much clearer way, that we are taking steps towards you so that we can see you so much better and your forgiveness so much more. We thank you for that gift, and thank you for your Son. I pray this in his name. Amen.